911 operators of Reddit, what was the dumbest non-emergency you picked up? Serious. Attention. Serious, tag notice. Jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. I've had so many I can't even remember most of them. Two that come to mind instantly are 1, toddlers whose parents give them phones to play with which aren't connected to any service. Yeah, they still work for 911, and we can't call you back on them either. Luckily the mapping system usually works pretty well to the extent that not only can I tell the address, but can often tell the officers which area of the house the calls are coming from. 2, dude called 911 because he got off a train at the wrong stop and was broke. Honestly, it wasn't even his predicament so much as he was absolutely obnoxious about it, even called 911 several more times after I had already told him officers were en route. Annoying that he's tying up a line for medical emergencies, but that being said, I'm going to preach a little. If you honestly think you may have an emergency but aren't sure if it qualifies for 911 use, don't worry about it and just do it. All emergency services personnel would much rather have much ado about nothing than have something terrible happen when it could have been prevented. This goes for all types of emergency/situations. Also, do not underestimate fire. It grows at an unbelievable rate and seconds can be the difference between life and death. The last major fire I worked, the caller called 911 and hung up on me after giving me her address. I called her back, at which point she tells me she came home to a small fire but it's out now. I dispatched the fire department and told her fire staff are on the way just to make sure. She said okay in a tone like that's really not necessary, and we ended the call. She called back a few minutes later very upset, telling me it wasn't extinguished after all. Ended up being a 2-alarm fire, gas lines and the walls on fire from basement to attic. Fire staff said if I had dispatched them when I did, the whole neighborhood would have gone up based on how woodsy and windy it was. What time does the parade or fireworks start? Is trash pickup delayed due to the holiday? Serious question, do these people face consequences if they are warned not to abuse the emergency line for shit like this, or is the thinking you don't want to discourage people from calling when they do actually need it? I think they basically get an asterisk next to their number if it's done repeatedly, maybe put on low priority for pickup, or just basically gets a warning next to their name with what the issue is. My sister has issues, and recently the operator asked about the number issue since she's kinda blacklisted my parents' home line and now her cell phone line. One caller was concerned for his safety when going outside his house because the neighbor a couple of houses down had his table saw out in his garage and he was afraid the wind would blow the blade over to his house and injure him. I really need to start writing these down. Removed. Sounds like a mentally ill person, rather than someone calling for stupid reasons. He was probably legitimately very concerned about something horrible happening. I used to work night audit at a Motel 6 in college. We had someone across the road who was quite unwell who would call us and 911 all the time to report the serial killer in a certain unit. There are far too many to mention, but the worst one was. The fuel pump won't accept my card, told them it wasn't a police matter and hung straight up. The dumbest one was middle of one night. Bloke rang in a panic and said he was being burgled. Had walked to the bathroom in the middle of the night and seen a guy on the landing. Sprinted back to his bedroom and rang the police. 3 cop cars and a dog unit speed over to his house and do a sweep of the house. Couldn't find anything. When one cop asked him where he'd seen this guy, he showed him the hallway, which had a very large full-sized mirror at the end. Turns out the guy had seen his own reflection in the dark. Needless to say, it caused a lot of laughter from the cops and in the control room. And a lot of embarrassment from the guy. Honestly, If I was a cop and I got called to a scene like that, that might just make my night low. Better it's a mirror than an actual dude. Imagine if it was a stand your ground state and this man pulled a military grade weapon on a mirror. Of course the mirror would then pull a weapon out on him, so he'd have to shoot the fuck out of the robber. My grandma used to call 911 to have the fire department being her milk. She lived next to the fire department. She did this multiple times. Eventually the fire chief gave her his direct line and he brought her milk until she came to live with us. She passed away in 2004. My grandma was in early stages of dementia when this was happening, and it was a small town fire department with a chief who had known her 30 years. Cute and sad. Also lived in a small town. Their system had it noted so they could call us for minor things that are an emergency for my aunt as a very old disabled person. Once we left town and let the police know that for that week the number would be irrelevant, that if she fell, slowly sat down in weakness and didn't have the strength to get up off the floor, then they would have to send somebody to help. That week the power went out, and the police chief called and asked if he could go hang out with them despite there not being an emergency. The perks of living in a small town. Guy even brought a small generator to power their fridge. When I was around 6, I was spending the day with my grandmother while my father was at work. She was preparing dinner for all of us and needed my father to pick something up on his way home. This was the age before cell phones were ubiquitous, and she didn't know his work number off the top of her head, but that's alright, I knew his work number. Now I was only 6, but I was pretty sharp for my age, so she just assumed that maybe I knew his work number. So she pulls me up on the tall chair by the phone and has me dial, and I do. 911. My father worked at fire dispatch, so I was technically correct. Anyway, a lady answered and I asked if my dad was there. Not his name, just my dad. We get into a bit of a back and forth about how I called 911 and yeah, I know, my dad works at 911. Eventually we do get my dad on the line, I think after the dispatcher asked my name. He asks to put my grandmother on the line. They talk for a bit, and that's that. Apparently it happens from time to time. It wasn't a huge deal, and I wasn't in trouble, but my dad made sure to put the proper call line on my grandmother's speed dial, and he had to talk to me about how I can't use that number if it's not an emergency. UK, my friend works as a 999 operative. She had one guy call and tell her he was a vampire. And another who pretended he could see something happening outside. That required armed response. She quickly called through to her line manager to explain she was pretty sure he was giving her details about an episode of The Wire, but they still had to send the armed response to an empty car park surrounded by high-rise buildings. This kind of thing is how innocent people end up dead slash. It is, but luckily, in the UK, it's a big faff to call the armed response team. They are not normal officers. They are a specialist team and have really strict protocol. In the UK, it's a big faff. Say no more, fam. Note, this is not a political statement about guns or anything, I'm just making fun of my overpawned brethren. I have a court date coming up, but I have to go camping that day. What should I do? Reporting the moon missing. Advice on what kind of lotion to put on a sunburn. Anytime the power goes out, a ton of people call the police and report their power being out. They have PSAs about this shit all the time. 1 in 5 calls on some days would be people asking for police and going, but I want non-emergency. Or calling 911 to ask for the 10-digit non-EMERG hash. Guy calling because he left his backpack inside of a hall when he was moving. Reporting the moon missing. Imagine having so much faith in your local police department that you think they can recover the moon. There are just too many. Others have already mentioned the calls asking for the non-emergency lines, or the racist ones with people who don't belong. I think the one that takes the cake for me was the lady who called in about a male with a dangerous weapon. Frantic caller, I want to report a suspicious male. Me, okay, where is he? Gets location, what makes him suspicious? Caller, well, he's walking down the street carrying a dangerous weapon. Me, what kind of weapon does he have and what is he doing with it? Caller, he has a snake. It's around his neck. Someone should do something. Me. Ma'am, a snake is not a weapon nor is it illegal. And hashtag X200B. Edit, forgot to add, with the new iPhone features making it easy to call 911, there have been many times I thought I was hearing a fight only to realize it was just people having sex and they bumped their phone too many times. Oh yeah, and the time Christian Grey called wanting a cop to come unlock his handcuffs because he accidentally used the real pair instead of the sexy pair.